Am I the asshole for breaking up with my girlfriend after she said we weren't a real couple? So, I, 23M, had a girlfriend, 20F, who I'll just call B. B and I met through the internet because we found out we were at the same concert, and I even showed up accidentally on the background of a selfie she took, which is admittedly pretty cool, and we started talking. We bonded very easily, since we have mostly the same interests, and then started dating after a few months. At the beginning, B would say that she wasn't ready for a relationship, and, to be honest, I wasn't either. So, we would just consider each other as partners, without actually putting a label on it. But then, one day, B set her Facebook status to dating me, and actually started to call me her boyfriend publicly to her friends and family, so, of course, I assumed we were a real thing now. Here comes the problem. B has this friend, I'm not sure how old she is, but I believe she's a year younger than B. I'll be calling her M, and M is very clingy, and honestly quite annoying, to the point of her demanding B's attention, even when she didn't feel like talking to anyone besides me. A few days ago, M came to B to demand attention again and said something along the lines of, "You're always paying attention to your boyfriend and forgetting about me," to which B responded with, "You know I'm not really dating him, right?" B sent me screenshots of her conversations with M, and we had a chuckle about it for a few minutes, before it clicked in my head what she had actually said. Now, if she had told me that she was gonna say that to test M's reaction, that'd be fine. But she didn't. She actually said that, unprovoked, and it got me thinking. During our entire relationship, I've always been really affectionate and caring of B, always meeting her every need. I bought her flowers, gifts, spent as much time with her as she would want me to, but then I started noticing that it felt like I always made more effort than B herself. I would move mountains for her, and she'd barely lift a leaf for me. I spoke to my best friend about it, 21F, and she said I should confront B about it, and all B could manage to say was that she was sorry, that she didn't think things through and that she wanted a second chance. She also victimized herself a fair bit before that, though, saying I hadn't paid attention to her earlier that day while knowing I was busier than usual and that, if I could, I would have been with her, no questions asked. I told her I didn't want anything more to do with her, with the help of my best friend, and we've since stopped talking. I have a very big trauma of speaking up about my feelings due to some past experiences with my ex, so telling her how much all of this hurt me, even though it's true, has been making me feel like a horrible person, to the point where I'm actually getting physically ill due to it. My friends all told me I made the right choice to cut things off before they got worse, and that B shouldn't have said that, but I can't help but be guilty about it. So, am I the asshole? Now let's move on to story 2. Am I the a-hole for giving my daughters 1 week to leave my house after what they did to their half-brother? I have 2 daughters. Both over 20. They graduated college and moved back in with me because they couldn't find a job. The house is my late husband's house, Robert. For context, their dad and I got divorced 9 years ago. I got remarried to Robert and had my 7-year-old son Tom. The girls didn't have a good relationship with Robert. In fact, they hated him because of what their dad filled their heads about him. They lived with their dad, they chose to, before going off to college. Robert passed away 6 months ago after a long battle with disease. It was just me and my son Tom. The girl's dad got remarried last year and the woman is basically a witch. That's why the girls stopped visiting there. They lived in rental apartment during college and their dad used to pay for rent but stopped after his wife fought with them. The girls couldn't get a job to pay for rent and asked if they could move in with me and Tom for a while. I, of course, said yes. Although I knew how they felt about Tom. They moved in and they were nice to Tom but also distant. 2 days ago, I had an expected call and needed to leave the house. Tom was in bed all day because he was sick and I asked the girls to look after him for 2 hours till I got back. I left quickly then an hour later, I got a text from Tom asking me to come home because he threw up again in his room. He said he called for his sisters to help but no one responded. I immediately tried to call them but both lines were busy. I did my best to come home earlier thinking the girls weren't at home, but turned out they were. One was downstairs the entire time, the other said she was using kitchen appliances, that's why she couldn't hear Tom. I was going to believe them till Tom said he tried to text them but they didn't respond. I checked their phones after they tried to deny it and he was right. His message was read but no response. I blew up at them both and called them pathetic. They argued that I was making them act like they are the parent and placing responsibility on them. I knew this wasn't about that. They hated Robert. Fine. That might be a little understandable. But Tom is a kid and he has no part in all of this to be treated like that. I knew they neglected him on purpose. So I told them they have 1 week to move out and they started arguing and even crying saying I'm being too harsh on them, and acting worse than their dad's new wife. I said this wasn't up for discussion and now both of them are giving me the silent treatment. Basically making me feel guilty about the whole thing. Maybe I've made a wrong decision. But seeing how they've neglected their brother merely out of resentment and hate makes me feel upset and quite concerned to have them around him. Now let's move on to story 3. Am I the asshole for getting a mother of 2 arrested because she assaulted me at work? I, 19M, work in a fairly popular chain retail store. Everything started about 3 days ago when I was working the closing shift. One thing to note about our store is that if an item is not in stock, the customer can ask us to order the item to any branch of their choosing, to be delivered for the next day. The woman in question walked through the doors about 2 minutes before we were closing and walked straight to the register where I was working. She looked quite rushed and started explaining that she was here to collect an order she had placed. I politely explained that the area to collect deliveries had closed several hours ago and that she would have to return tomorrow if she wanted to get her delivery. She began pleading and explained that she had been too busy taking care of her child and, who were with her, to come and pick her order up. I explained that the delivery area had its own separate staff and anyone with access to the room had already left the building. She seemed frustrated by this response but left with her children. Since I was already scheduled to be working the following day, I knew I would have to deal with the woman and was dreading having them return to the store as not only was she condescending and rude, but her children were quite loud and energetic and knocked over a lot of shit which I had to clean up. The following day I was about halfway through my shift when the woman walked up to my register and placed a candle on the counter which I rung her up for, and then she started demanding that I track her order as she went up to the collections area and they were unable to find the parcel. I checked the system and noticed that the order was placed over a month ago, so I told her that because she had not picked up her order within the 14-day window the order had likely been sent back to the warehouse. She flew off the handle saying it was all my fault and if I had just let her get the parcel yesterday everything would have been fine. I tried to explain that the parcel would have already been sent back weeks ago, but before I could even finish my sentence she picked up the candle and threw it at me. It was one of those candles in a glass jar, and it hit me in the temple and smashed to the ground, and I ended up falling and hitting my head on the wall behind me. As I was trying to get up she started shouting even louder and started throwing other various objects at me. The commotion must have attracted security as they ended up taking her to the back and held her and her 2 children there until the cops showed up, and my manger told me to go to the break room until she called me on my headset. I ended up sitting in the break room for about an hour and a half until my manger walked in with the cops. They sat down and started asking a bunch of questions about what happened and I told them everything. Then they asked me if I wanted to press charges on the woman, and even though I was not seriously injured outside of a bruise on my head I told them I would. My manager then told me to clock out early and said I could take the rest of the week off. When I went home I told my mom everything and she called me a heartless asshole and told me she didn't raise me like this. She said I should have thought about the impact it would have on the woman's children to have their mother in jail and that I wouldn't understand how difficult it is to be a mother. I initially thought I was in the right, but after talking to my mother I am now second-guessing myself, so I just want to know, am I the asshole? Thank you all so much for watching and don't forget to subscribe, like and comment down below your thoughts on these stories.